we're just gonna get rid of this thing. We don't need that stuff in our final product.
Now you're bringing logic into it, Dave. Welcome back to the Wilderstead. We've been waiting not so patiently for 2 weeks. Our apple scrap vinegar is ready for the next stage, as well as our hard apple cider.
I think we're going to start with the apple cider. This is going to be pretty simple. All we're going to be doing is transferring from this container into the secondary fermentation container, this big carboy here. So let's get started. Now you can make this as simple or as complex as you want to make it. For example, we have here a hydrometer. When we first started making cider, hard cider, and wine, the hydrometer was something that we used to learn about what we were doing, the simple steps of how to create a cider or a wine with alcohol in it. We no longer use the hydrometer. We don't need it anymore. You can still use it if you're really into making ciders and wines and things like that. This is a really cool way to geek out. Know exactly how much alcohol is in your beverage, know exactly how much sugar is in it, how much sugar you started with, things like that. We're going to eliminate this step. It's just not necessary for our purposes. So for that reason, we're just going to get rid of this thing. We don't need it. Let's just pop this open and we'll have a peek inside here and see what's going on. There we go. Oh yeah, smells amazing. Just gonna set this back on top so we don't get any bugs or anything trying to get in there. Now, on this little bucket that we have here, we attached this little spout a number of years ago. This has just made it very simple for us to transfer out of the primary fermentation container into the secondary fermentation container. I think we should probably have a little taste of this just to see how it is. First cider of the year. See how it is.
Oh, tingly.
Not too bad. It's very dry.
It is quite a dry cider. It's got a ways, not too much to go.
No, but we'll probably end up back sweetening this a little bit. That'll be later on in the bottling stage. We will get to that. Also have this little hose, the hose clamp on the end. It fits perfectly onto the spout here. So I'm just going to attach this. Gently tighten up the clamp just so it doesn't fall off of there while we're making the transfer. Put the hose into the carboy and pop open the valve. I'm just going to let it drain the entire bucket into the carboy. Just going to tip this forward a little bit, get the last little bit out of the bucket. I'll show you what it's looking like inside there in a minute here. You don't want to get every last drop out. If you look inside the bucket here, see the sludge on the bottom. That's what we want to avoid pulling out. The gross lees. We don't need that stuff in our final product. So, close the top. But what's left in here, that will just get dumped out, bucket washed. You can start the process all over again if you have more apple juice to deal with. This carboy is now ready to go back into the pantry with an airlock where it will stay for at least a couple more weeks while the cider starts to clarify itself, and you'll end up with more of that sludge in the bottom of this container, which is why we put it in here, just so that we can clarify the cider more, you can just drink it as it is. It's not going to hurt you, nothing like that. It's just a little more presentable. And after that comes bottling. Now it's time to move on to the apple scrap vinegar. So Amanda's going to take over for that. This is a little bit more of a process.
So this is apple scrap vinegar. It's not officially apple cider vinegar because you need to turn it into apple cider first before you turn it into vinegar to officially be apple cider vinegar. You cannot guarantee that this will have a high enough acidity to use it in canning, but you can use it for every other purpose that you normally use apple cider vinegar for, and it will taste just as delicious and be just as great. Using just the natural yeast, we did not add any yeast to this product. It has been fermenting for these 2 weeks, and as you can see, it is still going. This is yellow because it has actually had been so strongly fermenting, it pushed up some of the apple cider juice, or the apple juice, into the bubbler. So now I'm going to take the lid off. Ugh, these lids seal so tight. Whew. And just see what it looks like inside. So if you can remember, this is all the pulp, all the scraps left over after we made the apple cider. So I put a weight to weight the plate down in order to get most of the juice, in order to get most of the bits under the juice. You can see some of them came up, but since there was no air in there, since we had it such a tight seal, you can see there was no mold formed, nothing formed, just the apples and the juice. Now we have to get all this scrap, all this crap out of our juice, so we just have the apple scrap vinegar and no longer the scraps. We do not have a spout on this one, we just have one of them with a spout. So first I'll start by pouring it into a separate bucket, passing it through a filter. I have my handy oil strainer for that, and I just have a hole in the lid. You saw this in the last video. And so that just sits right in there, and then I can just pour the bucket right in there. Ugh, this is heavy. Okay, hopefully I can do this alone. As you can see, a lot of the juice is trapped up in the pulp. So in order to get all that juice out of the pulp, we are going to press it. We're using our smaller press that we have. But if you do not have a press, you can just use a mesh bag, a very fine mesh as you see, and then just squeeze it out. Put all the scraps in here and squeeze it to get all the juice out. So I'm just gonna scoop it into the press. Press it, and then the chickens can have what's left, or just put it right in the compost.
I think they know what's going on.
Yeah, they're asking for it.
Yep, they want the apples.
This process can be a bit messy. That's why we're doing it outside. Smells like alcohol. I should maybe try a sip of this stuff to compare. Okay, that's enough for the first batch. This one works a little bit differently than the big guy. That's it for round one. I'm just going to pull this out, and since it's already in the bag, I can just pull the bag out and then dump it into the chicken coop.
I think actually it's getting late in the day. We may want to wait and give them the apple scraps earlier in the day tomorrow because of the bears that potentially are going to show up here if they smell apples all over the place.
Now you're bringing logic into it, Dave.
Well, someone has to.
Crazy. And then repeat till you have all this apple pulp squished out. We had enough to fill it just about 3 times, just short of 3 times. That is it for the scraps. And all the juice is in this bucket. Most of the volume that was in the last bucket was the scraps and the peels. So you won't get a full bucket of cider. That's why we're not using a full carboy. We should be able to fill most of the way both of these smaller carboys, which are 1 gallon each. Not bad for scraps. Do you want to try this, Dave?
Oh, well, let's give it a taste. See how it is.
Cheers.
Very sweet.
Very sweet and still very mild, not at all vinegary tasting. So it has quite a bit to go, and that's why it was still bubbling. We'll let it continue. This one's already started bubbling.
Still a little bit more fermentation to happen with this. Not surprised with that at all. That's why we do a secondary fermentation. But these are just going to go back into the pantry and they'll sit there for another couple weeks and we'll get back to it. You'll see what happens next. And we have a little bit of a trip coming up that you guys will probably be interested in. We're traveling across Ontario to meet another YouTuber. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be very cool. I wonder if anyone can guess who we might be going to visit. This has been a long time in the making. We're going there to visit someone and to get something or some things.
So I guess until next time, we'll see ya.